Hey everybody, welcome to Flaming Dice Reviews. My name is Sergio, and today we're going to take a look at Hive Pocket Edition by Gen 42 Games. Hive is an abstract strategy game designed for 2 players, and it's really a lot like chess, if chess was like dominoes. In Hive, each player has a number of tiles with insects on them, and the objective of the game is to surround your opponent's queen bee with your tiles. Each of the tiles has a different movement that it can make that are governed by a set of rules. So let's just go ahead and jump right in and take a look at the game. Here's the layout showing all of the different pieces that you get with your Hive Pocket Edition. Each player gets 13 tiles, and you can see that each player will get 1 queen bee, 1 ladybug, 1 mosquito, 2 beetles, 2 spiders, 3 grasshoppers, and 3 ants. Each of the different insect types have different movements that they're able to make. So the ant is able to move any number of spaces around the outside edge of the hive. While the grasshopper is only able to jump straight lines directly across the top of the other tiles. It's unable to make the moves around the outside edge. So if you were to move the grasshopper, in this case, he would go from here directly across the top and land in the next available space. If he were to do it here, he could go to there, or he could go to there, or he could go back to where he was. That move makes the grasshopper one of the only insects that can get out of a space like this, or like this. The spider is one of the harder pieces to move. The spider has to move 3 spaces, no more, no less. So in this case, the spider would move 1 space to right there, 2 spaces to right there, and 3 spaces to right there. The spider isn't able to move across the top. But in an instance like this, if you were to go here, that would be 1 space, and then 2 spaces to there, and 3 spaces to there. Next you have the beetle. The beetle is only able to move 1 space, but the beetle can move on top of the hive. So he would be able to go 1 there, 1, 1, 1, and then eventually drop back down. This enables the beetle to get into tight spaces that other things can't get into. For instance, if this spider was gone, none of the insects would be able to make it through this gap. This is called freedom of movement. So the ant, although he's able to move anywhere around the outside perimeter, he wouldn't be able to fit into that hole, so he wouldn't be able to fill that space. But the beetle would be able to walk all the way across and drop down in. Additionally, the grasshopper would be able to make that move and land in there as well. If you had a legal move to get to there, let's say that this grasshopper was right here, he would be able to jump and land in that space. In fact, he would have to land in that space. He wouldn't be able to land. He wouldn't be able to jump and skip that space and land over here. He would have to jump and land into the next available space. Next we have the ladybug. The ladybug is part of the expansion, and it comes in the Pocket Edition, but if you don't have the Pocket Edition and you just have the core set, you won't have these unless you purchase them separately. The ladybug also has to move 3 spaces. But the ladybug has to move 1, 2 across the top, so if it were to jump up here, the ladybug would move like this. 1 to there, 1 to there, and drop down. Or 1 to there, 1 to there, and it could drop down into either of these spaces. This makes the ladybug a little bit harder to move compared to the other insects, but it's still a useful piece, and there are a lot of times where your opponent doesn't see the move coming. Next we have the mosquito. The interesting thing about the mosquito is that it gets the movement ability of whatever insect it's touching for that turn. So if it's touching these three, it could use any of their movements for this turn. So it would be able to make the ladybug movement of 1, 2, drop down, or 1, 2, drop down, or what have you. But additionally, it would be able to use the beetle's movement and go up to the top. Now, if it does this, if the mosquito does the beetle's move in this case and is on top, it stays as a beetle until it drops back down. So it could move across all of this, but once it dropped back down, it would get a different movement. So if you're in a situation where the mosquito is touching right here, it's able to move as the ant or as the grasshopper. So it would be able to make a jump across, or it would be able to move around the outside as the ant. One thing to know about the mosquito is that if it's touching another mosquito, like this, it does not get a movement ability because the mosquito doesn't have a movement of its own. So in this case, this mosquito now can no longer move. And lastly, we have the queen bee. The queen bee can only move one space. She can't go up on top of the pile, and she can only move around where she can fit. So similar to the other ones, if you had a situation like this, which, I mean, you wouldn't want to do this, but your queen bee couldn't get inside of there. And that is how the movement works for the individual pieces. Now let's look at some example of gameplay. In Hive, each players take turns alternating, and they can do one of two things on their turn. They can move a piece or they can place a piece. Now, on the first turn of the game, each player will place one piece in the center of the table, and this is the only time in the game that when you're placing a piece, they can be placed touching your opponent's color. So for the next placement, the white tile would not be able to be placed here because it cannot be placed touching the black tile. It would have to be placed on one of these spaces here. Now when you're placing, you have to place your queen bee within the first 4 moves of the game. And once the bee is placed, you are able to begin moving your other pieces around. So white placed their tile here. So we will say that black placed his tile here, and we will say that white decided to place another ant there. And maybe black decided that they would place an ant also. Maybe something like this. And then white decides to place their bee. And now black also has to place their bee because we're at that point in the game. Like that. Now that the bees have been placed, either player can begin to move their other insects around, or they can place new tiles. In this game, you don't have to place all of your tiles to play the game. You can have less tiles on the board than your opponent. So in this case, it is white's turn, and for white's turn, they would probably move their ant somewhere like this. Now that that's been done, one thing to note for strategic purposes is that the hive can never be broken. That's the main rule of the game, is that the chain can never be broken. So this piece can now not be moved because it would leave that piece broken away or stranded from the hive. So when you place an ant or any creature really, any insect really, on your opponent's bee like that, now the bee is trapped and can't move. And the object of the game is to completely surround your opponent's queen bee. So on that turn, black would probably either go here to trap white's queen bee, or could potentially go to right here to reconnect the chain and allow the queen to move into a safer position, which would give them the ability to trap white's ant. But we'll say that they went there, that black went there to trap white's b from moving also. So on the next turn of the game, it would be white's turn to place or move. And a good move here would be to move this ant right here. Now, the reason I would put it there is to avoid connecting the chain and allowing their b to move. So white would go there to stop the queen from being able to move again. Next, black would place, and they would probably just place an ant. Maybe even right here, which would let it be white's move. And white would need another creature out, so they would probably play their tile here. Or something to that effect, maybe here, to set up for surrounding the queen. And then maybe black would activate the grasshopper. Now the grasshopper, remember, jumps. So from here, the grasshopper would be able to jump to there, or to here. Now, obviously, this is the best movement because your objective is to surround your opponent's queen. Next, it would be white's turn, and white could place another tile or can move a tile. Because of the situation we're in, it would be beneficial to probably move the ant onto the queen to try and solidify the win. So it can move around. Now you could place it there, but that would connect the chain and allow the bee to move out. So strategically, it would be better to place it here. Now the queen still can't move, and even if, let's say, black moves to right here to make the chain, the queen still can't move because she can't fit through that space. So she's effectively trapped. So the game's all but over. Next, black would probably place another ant, maybe right here. And now white would go and probably place a mosquito here. And then black would go and maybe do something like that. And then white would go and do something like this. And then it would be black's turn again. And they would probably just take the grasshopper and place it here. Because remember, the grasshopper jumps straight over tiles, so on the next turn, you'll be able to jump there to block those empty spaces. And then the white player would probably do something similar like this, which would leave it to a victory for the white. So as you can see, it's an extremely simple game to play. The hardest part is knowing what the insects are able to do for their movement. But the rulebook's very small and it's very comprehensive, and it's easy to just pick up, take a look at what each tile can do, and move them. But chances are you'll catch on very quickly. And even though the game is simple, as you can see, there is quite a bit of depth to it, depending on the placement of the insects that you use and how your initial layout is made. The game can really evolve into something quite in-depth and quite strategic. Welcome back. So now that we had a chance to look at the components of the game and a bit of the gameplay, let's talk about my final thoughts. For me, Hive is a win. I really love this game a lot. I love the portability, I love how easy it is to learn, but still how rich of a strategy it has, and I love the build quality of it. The tiles are excellent, as you can tell from the video. And the strategy is is deep, but it's super easy to learn. There's only a few pieces. They all have a different movement, but it's not overly complicated to learn. And you can play it just about anywhere. I would recommend this game for anybody who wants to get a game in at the coffee shop with some friends, or anybody who is going out of town and wants something to play on the plane or the train or at the hotel or what have you. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give us a like, maybe share it, give us a comment, and follow us on our website at www.flamingdicereviews.com, where you can find articles and other game reviews for your viewing pleasure. Thanks. Welcome to Flaming Dice Reviews. My name is Sergio, and today, seriously, that's Matt right there texting me.